one of the interesting parts of this conference. And my name is Bill Ahue. I'm the head of the NATO Liaison Office in Georgia. We have an interesting set of panelists talking about cybersecurity and physical security of critical energy infrastructure. And this is a topic that's important to NATO, given that one of the few uncontroversial areas of energy security that NATO can get involved with is critical energy infrastructure, because as you all know, energy security crosses far beyond the boundaries of traditional defense. And we have a number of interesting panelists to discuss these things. And first is David Cafteradze, working with the Data Exchange Agency, and this is the main institution under the Ministry of Justice dealing with cybersecurity issues for the country of Georgia. Mikhailo Gonchar, looking forward to hearing from on your brief, expert on Ukrainian energy security issues, and it's important to point out, I think, that Ukraine, I think so far, is the only country that has suffered a cyber attack to its energy infrastructure, which affected over 200,000 citizens with blackouts. And so this demonstrates the ability of cyber to do real damage in countries. Then we have Walter Strodel, expert, Strodel, I'm trying to pronounce it correctly, from Austria, military analyst on security regarding terrorism and its impact, and particular expertise in the region. I understand you were an EUMM and been in Georgia in this region before. Eugene Kogan from GFSIS, Foundation for Strategic and International Studies, a real expert on the Caucasus region, expert on security issues, in particular Russia and relations and influence in this region. And then Tinatin Karasanidze, who is a specialist on terrorism and security issues in Georgia and the region. So thank you. And I think we have to keep our briefing short, please. If we get 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, if we do 10 minutes each on average, we'll make it in time then to have the panel and questions and get out of here by about 7:20, 7:30, something like that. Okay, and so we will open with David, with your briefing from DC.
Hello everyone, my name is David Cafteradze. I will speak very briefly because we are out of time. I am representing governmental cert of Georgia, and I will speak about what kind of cyber security solutions we have for critical information system subjects, and what kind of incidents was solved by us. CERT-GOG, Computer Emergency Response Team of Georgia, is a governmental team, and it is under of Ministry of Justice of Georgia. And our main responsibilities is cyber incident coordination, incident analysis, and incident handling. Here you can see our Georgian cyberspace ecosystem. Here you can see 4 players in this space. First one is our CERT, Georgian governmental CERT. As you see, our constituency is Georgian critical information system subjects and private sector. Second player is Ministry of Internal Affairs, especially cybercrime division, and this division only one agency who has investigation functions by law in Georgia. Third, and their constituency is cybercrime. Third player is State Security Service of Georgia, which was established 1 year ago, and their constituency is State Secret Information. And last player is Ministry of Defense from Cyber Security Bureau. Their main responsibility is military network and incidents which happen in the Ministry of Defense. In cyberspace, international cooperation is very important, and we have very good cooperation with international organizations such as IMPACT, which is International Telecommunication Union. We also our team is a full member of FIRST. FIRST is CERT, worldwide CERT community. There are CERTs such as Google CERT, Facebook CERT, Cisco CERT. This is huge CERTs in IT industry. We are accredited team of Trusted Introducer. Trusted Introducer is European CERT community, and there are a lot of CERTs from European Union and NATO countries, military CERTs, governmental CERTs, and national CERTs also. And we are authorized to use the CERT trademark, which belongs to CERT Carnegie Mellon Institute. Here you can see a list of our certificates, and I am very proud of my team members. Here you can see SANS leading 4 certificates in system and network auditor, in incident handling, in secure coding. We also, all our team members are certified by Trusted Introducer, which is European CERT community. SANS is leading US institute in cybersecurity. Now I will speak briefly about our services, which we are providing for our critical information system subjects, and all these services are free for them and for governmental organizations. First one is Blacklist Service. Every Georgian network and system administrator can visit our website and import blacklists for their services. Example, for firewalls, for different IP tables, and so on. This is, as I mentioned, is free. We also have Safe DNS Georgia. This is available for free for all Georgian citizens. Every Georgian citizen can use our DNS IP addresses, and this DNS automatically blocks websites which contains malware, which contains phishing, scam, and more than 600,000 websites which contains 80+ content. We also are monitoring our clients, critical information system subjects, and different ministries. With we have 2 options. First one is Netflow traffic monitoring, and with Netflow we can detect several attacks such as SSH brute force attacks. We can identify botnets and viruses in this network, in this mentioned network, and we can also identify DDoS attacks. We also have a deep packet inspection, and from here we can analyze and detect APT, Advanced Persistent Threat Attacks. We also have honeypot systems in our our infrastructure, and of course we have a honeypot system into our client systems. We are emulating a lot of services such as Kipo, SCADA system, MySQL, SQL, SMB, and so on. We have more than 2,000 attacks per day, and we have created our automatic tool which is parsing these IP addresses and sending these IP addresses to our partner countries. Next one is a website intrusion detection system. And what is this? This is a vulnerable bot computer which every day visits more than 200 governmental websites, and lot of commercial bank sites and so on. And if this system detects there some kind of malicious activity, it automatically gives us reports. After this, our specialists are writing the reports and sending these reports with recommendation how to remove this mentioned malware. We also have penetration service, penetration test service. We can penetrate web application systems and network systems. We are using for this commercial top 10 to these tools are OWASP top 10 tools, IBM AppScan, HP Web Inspect. We are also using open source products such as Nessus, WAF, Nikto, and so on. And this service also free for critical information system subjects and for governmental organizations. We also have spear phishing attack simulation. And what is this? Every organization can check how they are ready against phishing or spam attacks. We can send them the emulated phishing link, and after that we can give them how many employees click on this link and how many employees, put there their username and password. And after that, when they put this username and password, we can provide them awareness training. Now I will speak about information sharing platforms. We have several platforms for information sharing. In cybersecurity, everyone knows that information sharing is one of the priority, and for this we have created several platforms. First one was created specially for Georgian critical information system subjects. By law, we have 39 critical information system subjects by Georgian law. Everyone in Georgian everyone from these critical information system subjects have username and password to access this system. And 24/7 they can report as incident and see how the incident handling process going on. This is the one platform. Now, as I mentioned, we have very good cooperation with international organizations. We have very good cooperation with European CERT. We have very good cooperation with Shadow Server, with Team Camry, Arbor. These are, leading companies in cybersecurity. Example, Arbor is one of the biggest companies who is stopping DDoS attacks in this field. We have a very good cooperation with European CERT, CERT Austria, CERT Poland, CERT Estonia. We have signed memorandum with the Microsoft Security Division, and we are receiving from them information daily basis. Example, infected IP addresses which are located in Georgian cyberspace. Example, from Shadow Server, it is 10,000 IP addresses which are located in Georgian cyberspace. From Team Camry, 5,000, from Arbor, 4,000, and so on. We are also receiving information about websites, 15-20 phishings which are located in Georgian cyberspace, 25-30 deface websites, and 15-20 sites which contains malware, malicious code. And this is the first platform for the organizations. We have different clients, commercial banks, governmental organizations in this system. And what is this system? In this system, there's two bases. In first base, we are uploading all this information, which we are which we are receiving from international organization. On second base, we have IP pools, IP range for our clients. And this system compares these two bases and give us reports. Example, which IP address is infected, which organization is infected. This is confidential. What is the infection type, and when was this infection happened. After that, our specialists automatically sending this report with recommendation how to remove this mentioned malware. And we have created this system 4 years ago, and we already uploaded here 15 million infected IP addresses, and from these 15 million, 180,000 IPs are unique. This is a very huge number for the Georgia. Now I will speak about our new portal, which was created for all Georgian citizens, and all Georgian citizens can use this portal. They can check the website history when example was dea.gov was infected. You only need to write here example dea.gov, and system automatically gives you the report what was happened with dea.gov's website. There was deface 4 years ago, and you can check what kind of deface. From Iran, someone hacked our website. Also, Georgian citizens can check his IP infected or not. I'm out of. Okay, 1 minute. Okay. If the red screen will appear, it means that your IP address is infected. If blue, it means that your IP address is not infected. This is the statistics, top 10 IP addresses which are infected in Georgia, and statistics about websites. Example, about 65% of websites in Georgia contains malware. About 25% of websites are defaced by hackers and activists, and about 4% of websites are spreading phishing. Now I will speak about. Okay. Okay. If you have any questions. Okay.
Sorry, David. There's unfortunately we're running short of time, but thank you so much. This is what's interesting about this for me is just how Georgia has advanced in the last 5 years with cybersecurity instruments, and Data Exchange Agency has done a tremendous amount of work to prepare Georgia and to support your infrastructure. Now, I will pass the floor to Michailo. Yes. Yes.
I had a question. Are there safe sites in Georgia? And do you have any working relations with our electricity system operator or gas system operator? How are they protected?
Yes, we have very good cooperation with Georgia's state electro system, and we are sharing some incidents, but we have memorandum with our clients, and we cannot give this report to the third party. Okay. But some of the incidents you can find on our website, but these incidents are depersonalized. Okay.
And I think this is a good segue into Mikhail's. Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Have you encountered cases of direct Russian attacks on your system?
Yes. Yes, and on my last slide there was some reports and incidents how we handle the cyber attacks which was coming from Russia. And there are really interesting incidents. Technically, it's very interesting. Some APT attacks and 0 days was happened in Georgia also.
And we'll have, I'm hoping, about 20 minutes or so at the end to ask more questions about these things. This is a good segue into Mikhailo's briefing because, again, Ukraine being a target of a real attack with real damage. Looking forward to hearing your brief.
much, Mr. Chairman. We are waiting for the microphone.
Okay. Many thanks, first of all, for invitation to take part in this conference, very interesting conference as for me. I will not speak about my think tank. Only one position. We are partner of NATO Energy Security Center of Excellence. We have good cooperation with NATO Liaison Office in Ukraine during long time. And we issued several papers in the context of hybrid war experience, especially energy component in new generation warfare. It is in free access in English on our website, and Putin's hybridization, it's only in Russian language, but we later in English too. And we are involved into new established platform under the umbrella of Joint Commission NATO-Ukraine around experience of new generation warfare, hybrid war. So, if you take consideration hybrid aggression of Russia against Ukraine, first case when Ukraine lost energy infrastructure took place in March 2014, 3 weeks after the start of Russian invasion into Crimea. Naval forces of Ukraine were blocked in the base of Sevastopol and Donuslav. Drilling and extractive platforms, gas platforms, were captured by Russian paratroopers who had landed on platforms. The loss of 1.6 billion cubic meters in national gas production from the overall level of 21.5 BCM annually is not very sensitive for Ukraine, but first of all, this gas was transmitted to the peninsula only to peninsula for Crimea. However, it means the loss of almost all marine gas production infrastructure and multi-promised projects, which were initiated by majors, for example, ExxonMobil, Shell, OMV, Italian ENI, and French EDF. It was very interesting project, and the production agreement was prepared for signing. Consequently, Russian strategy and in this context was directed how to interrupt realization of these huge Black Sea shelf projects, because gas from new open gas fields means additional competitiveness for gas supplies from Russia. Now these projects, of course, were cancelled. Next position. Let me help you to gain an insight of two major energy networks of Ukraine: gas transmission system and the integrated power system, which are among the largest in Europe. Only one comparison. For example, gas transmission system has 72 gas compressor stations. Slovak gas transmission system, which is a logic continuation of our pipes, have only 4 gas compressor stations. Consequently, it's a serious system as integrated power system of Ukraine, which consists of 4 nuclear power plants, 15 nuclear units, 14 thermal power plants, 102 hydroelectric generating units, etc., etc. So you see, it's a huge task to provide protection of critical energy infrastructure. If you take consideration practice of Russian Federation during early stage of Russian invasion into eastern part of Ukraine, in Donbass. Gas transmission system of Ukraine was the object of subversions at the initial stage in May and June 2014. 3 explosions, sabotage actions on the object of gas transmission system disguised as technical incidents were to strengthen the propaganda rhetoric of Gazprom aimed at discrediting of Ukraine as a transit country and for some media speculation on TV. First of all, propagandist channel Live News. The sabotage actions, they have been committed on the main gas pipeline Urengoy-Pomary-Uzhgorod, did not result in any interruption of gas supply to the EU for a second. Why? Because level or coefficient of interconnectivity of our gas pipeline system is very high, highest in Europe. Consequently, in the case of some damages possibilities exist to provide some bypass gas flows to European consumers. If you take consideration area of Beitel area, I can conclude that gas distribution networks located in the Beitel area suffered 31 breakdowns, serious breakdowns. Functionality had been renewed after repair works in 21 cases. In regards to the fighting power grid, 12 backbone power lines with high voltage remain damaged. The impact of above-mentioned damages to functioning of Ukrainian gas transmission system and integrated power system were localized without any serious consequences for stability of energy systems. Several points concerning unrealized plans of Russia during a hybrid war against Ukraine. According to available information, since the spring 2014, Russia has been working out options for critical energy infrastructure defeat in Ukraine when it started the Novorossiya project. The objectives should become assets in the integrated power system of Ukraine and gas transmission system. It was assumed that after defeat of the key energy infrastructure, Ukraine would suffer from power shortages with non-functioning IPS and GTS. You see, this plan were described, but it was unsuccessfully. This subversive group was neutralized. If you take consideration existing plans, who knows? Several points are very important. According to perception of Russia, these scenarios were considered: direct strikes on the major power generation objects in the case of offensive. Next scenario, hidden sabotage actions. It was suggested disabling of the water supply system for nuclear power plants in not far from Zaporizhia, Energodar. It's energy heart of Ukraine, because biggest Ukrainian nuclear power plant, and not only Ukrainian, but biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, 6 nuclear units. And biggest in Ukraine thermal power plant is located not far from nuclear power plant. Under the cyber scenario, the cyber attacks on the operation dispatching system of the integrated power system of Ukraine were suggested. Unfortunately, for these plans were not realized because special measures which were directed to prevent this action were very effective from Ukrainian side. Cyber attacks. On 23 December 2015 in Ukraine, a cyber attack on the control system of 3 regional distribution electricity networks in Prikarpattia Oblenergo, Chernivtsi Oblenergo, and Kyiv Oblenergo took place. Thus, 220,000 consumers, at approximately about 1% of the total number of consumers in Ukraine, in Prikarpattia, as well as in Kyiv and Chernivtsi regions, was disconnected. The disconnection lasted from 1 to 3 hours. A study initiated after this case showed that the attack on the regional electricity distribution companies of Ukraine began yet in May 2014. So December 23, it was final stage of long process of cyber penetration into integrated power system. It was confirmed not only by Ukrainian specialists, but American experts which were involved into estimations of this cyber activity. Source of cyber attacks was in Russia. It was confirmed by our American colleagues too. So next point. Main success during last year is zero import Russian gas. You see from this slide that Ukraine had serious import dependence from Russian gas during a long time. But now we have zero import and all gas imports only from the EU countries. Through Slovak Republic, first of all, Hungary and Poland. It's very important for us, and I exclude other position and some recommendation and conclusion. Critical energy infrastructure of Ukraine preserved its functionality, and parts captured by Russian military forces and separatist units are not fatal. Attempts to conduct subversive attacks and cyber attacks against critical infrastructure units in Ukraine during the 33 months of the war have no success and were stopped by counter-actions of Ukrainian side. Russia activates cyber attacks with the aim to provoke blackout of the IPS of Ukraine and GTS2. It's maybe to generate large-scale gas crisis in Europe and blackmail Ukraine with the following pressure on the EU to support Nord Stream 2 project. Hybrid warfare platform under umbrella UA-NATO Joint Commission is established. Ukrainian government considers joining to the NATO Centers of Excellence, first of all, to the Energy Security Center. NATO should strengthen its intelligence capacities and centers of excellence, cyber defense, STRATCOM, and energy security from my point of view, with regards to potential of the Russian Federation to generate hybrid threats. Analysis of Russian hybrid war against Ukraine makes evident that Russia will activate subversions against Europe in different sectors, in particular through large-scale cyber attacks. Massive cyber attacks are possible during this upcoming winter season against energy systems and networks in the EU. And last point, more securization of the South Caucasus, Caspian and Central Asian regions is needed to provide protection for the future gas flows to Europe. The answer to the question, Are NATO and the EU able to provide security is, unfortunately, from my point of view, raise a negative. Therefore, large-scale project to diversify hydrocarbon supplies to Europe from Caspian region, Central Asia, would most probably be realized only on the paper as Nabucco, unfortunately. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mikhailo. It's a really sobering example of what can happen with attacks against energy infrastructure. And now we'll get into the experts on sabotage and terrorism, which you gave examples of, and with Walter Strodl, who's I introduced previously. Thank you, Walter.
Okay, hello everyone. I'll try to skip most of the slides to give Eugene a chance to have the floor as well. I will focus basically on the, let's call them Russian-speaking offsprings and the global terrorist jihadi groups with potential to come back home when their mission is accomplished or disrupted by enemy forces, mainly in the Near East. So focusing on people active in Syria. The agenda was like this. I skip it because I won't keep it. The reasons to join are quite simple. Many people, when think of terrorists and terrorist activities, have quite a strong opinion how a terrorist should look like. So when you close your eyes and you think of a dog, you have a picture of a dog in front of you. When you think of a car, you have a picture of a car in front of you. When you think of a terrorist, you have a jihadist in front of you. So that should be kept in mind, that terrorist groups are currently perceived as Muslim jihadists rather than any other form of terrorist activities, which still is in place nowadays. The reason why people join, quite widespread, you see it here. The access to information with global access with internet didn't make the thing a lot better, because nowadays, even in the last corners of the world, people can realize that they're not the winning party of globalization. So the front of people who believe that they are the losers of the world market is actually growing by day. So the frustration of not being on the right side of the winner street is actually increasing regardless what the West or what people with money would do. That, together with the feeling of injustice, gives actually the left and right corner of something which leads up in fanatism or in kind of, I can become a hero for my community if I do something great. And that's actually driving people into the vicinity of, let's call it, social networks or information, or into globalization of this whole jihadi groups. So they are interlinked, they recruit each other, they travel a lot, and in the end, they end up as terrorists or as groups who are willing to sacrifice more than most of us are willing to sacrifice. This is a map not only focusing on terrorist attacks coming from what we believe is a terrorist, this jihadi person with an AK-47. This is actually happening all across, left, right, up, black, dark, any form of violence with a political target to harm people. So we should keep in mind it's not only the jihadists we should focus at when we talk about threats. There is a lot more people out there who are losers of globalization and who actually cannot accept the fact that the pipeline passes the village with no electricity, earning grants for Georgia, but they are not part of it. So one of my points where I ask what's the input of HUMINT, most of the communities are losers of this whole system and are not willing to work with corporations who make money on their expense. So that makes HUMINT a quite difficult job to track down somebody who is harming that, because most of the villages affected by environmental impacts of these infrastructures are very much willing to help to sabotage the big black men up there who become rich of us. So that should be kept in perspective. I will skip the data now here. This is quite interesting. It's a research done 2015. Unfortunately, it's not done for now. The magenta color indicates a rise, and the gray one a drop in numbers compared to the previous year. It just should give you a general overview worldwide which kind of business was disrupted by sabotage, or what commonly known as terrorist attack, even though nobody was harmed. But the numbers are quite impressive, and you see that basically here the numbers are quite high, and obviously the retail sector, the transportation sector, and the area where energy is produced out of the soil are the weak spots nowadays, where most attacks happened. This is more for the regional. I skipped that one. I want to come to Turkey because all pipeline we are discussing now are somehow linked to the goodwill of Turkey as a country. I'm not focusing on political developments on Turkey here. That would be completely off my topic. But I do want to stress that, sorry, it was too fast. That Turkey has quite some opposition of groups I just mentioned before who don't consider themselves as a part of the winner when it comes to Turkey becomes a huge energy hub. And there is money generated for the GDP, and there's tax revenues, but these groups are not part of this game. So they have quite a substantial amount of support in the regions, which also can backfire in the security and safety of some of the network projects, where we consider Turkey as a quite safe country. That could be maybe a problem in strategic thinking. There is a huge gap in the society in Turkey when it comes to conception of we are the good ones and we are united behind our government. I also want to stress the situation in Syria, not too much because the following speaker will go there as well. I have to stress it nevertheless for the simple reason that there is quite a strong link to the Caucasus area. I have identified in my last research, or kind of, well, let's call it research, there are various groups who are not necessarily interlinked with each other. Obviously they know each other. I mean, the Caucasus is not like the whole world. I mean, people talk, people know, people have friends, but you can more or less cluster 4 groups, or let's say a few groups, and I took out some key play of each of these groups to give you an example. What's this group about? Or what's their scorecard, kind of. So one of the more famous ones, this guy from Georgia with Chechen background. I think he's quite famous. He made a quite strong path after he was left from the Georgian military. I think he's quite well known. I would like to stress his CV not for the simple reason that he's the most prominent representative of a special group, but I would like to focus the awareness in Georgia that there is a group of youngsters living integrated, not integrated in Georgia, who have no ties with whatsoever jihadi group and who still manage to radicalize themselves in a way that become a military leader of something like ISIL or ISIS or Islamic State or Daesh, however you call it. But there is a substantial risk in Georgia that if remote areas are not taken into consideration to give them the feeling at least that they're part of the economic success of energy link money in Georgia, there could be a mutual support of these areas for self-radicalization of some of the people there, that the community will protect them from the state authorities. So if the state authorities track something, want to investigate something, they won't get a further hint because the people just trust their family more than the state. And this is the most prominent example of this group. Homegrown, independent radicalization, and then off we go. And there's plenty of opportunities to prove your military skills nowadays on the world, and it's not getting less. So if you want to do something, you will get a ticket to heaven. The second one is more related to the Kafkas Emirate and to the Al-Qaeda group. Again, one example, but there's a lot more behind this. There's a whole group who is linked to the Kafkas Emirate, who lives in Georgia and who has been silent for years and have been not necessarily paying any attention, or the authorities were not forced to pay attention to these guys because they were quite okay in not being too violent. But nevertheless, this person started to become active again when he was suggested to compromise his fellow comrades when they were ambushed in the Lopoda Gorge, and Kafkas Emirate leaders accused him of betraying them and was the main source for Georgian intelligence to track this ambush. He twisted it around in a way that he wanted to warn them, and this warning was intercepted. Whatever was the story about this whole gameplay in Lopoda Gorge, it resulted in this guy in leaving to Syria. So he said, okay, I'm done with you guys. I'm not one of yours anymore. I go to Syria. He went to Latakia. He joined an al-Nusra group, so a more, let's say, Islamic form of jihadi group rather than an Islamic State. So they consider themselves more real spiritual and more close to the Quran. Started to fight the Russians there, and after Tugomarov was poisoned, supposedly, the Kafkas Emirate wanted him to rejoin the allies again with the Kafkas Emirate. He refused. He said, no, I'm my own star now, I'm my own hero. I have a huge group of Chechen-speaking people here. I'm a local hero. I don't need to come back to the Caucasus. I'm fine. And actually, I don't want to fight for your banner. And it was published on one of these websites where he is speaking. Then one guy who is a quite bad story also for Austria, Ahmed Shaddaif, he's also well known in Georgia again. He lost not his mind but his foot here. He is quite well known because he was one of the guys who was part of this Lopoda Gorge incident where he was captured. At that point, he still was Austrian citizen. He also had an asylum status in Austria. And I think he is a good proof why developed democracies can be challenged quite easily by these kind of individuals, because they are all Russian affiliated people where Russia has asked Europe to give them to their justice. And the problem in that sense was that they wouldn't face a fair trial. Even though Europe was aware of the bad stories about these guys, they still were not allowed to get these people to Russia because of the not fair trial. And I remember myself, my authorities tried to get some intelligence after this act, and they would have needed some proof, like, it's enough if the Georgian authorities would give an official report by the state, there is a hand grenade, a weapon, or whatever found on his body while he was captured, because that would be proof enough just to get the legal status of a refugee off. And it was impossible to get that for months, even for a year. So just an example how info sharing on such a scale can be an issue. So to sum it up, if Islamic State fails, if Syria becomes bombed out from Russia, if all these people, various groups, these four I mentioned, have to seek some host nation support to have a sustainable future, some of them might come back to the Caucasus, and you cannot exclude that option. And if they come back, it will be a huge mess. And the mess looks like this: 5 kilo TNT. Everything which is orange is completely done, and what's red is kind of vanished in a different state of mind. So basically you need 5 kilos to explode a pipeline. You need a boat with something like 1,000 kilos to completely destroy an offshore. And you need something like 8 tons to just collapse a building of 3 stories. So what I'm stressing, you cannot avoid it, you cannot predict it, and sometimes it's the group you least expect to become a threat. In this case, the PKK bombed the pipeline and not the jihadists. So know your enemy, you know risks, and then you can have successful countermeasures. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. And thank you for bringing that to the Caucasus. It was really a sobering example of the potential threats to Georgia and the region from these terrorists. So at this point, I'd like to pass the microphone over to Eugene, and thank you.
Thank you. I have no slides. First of all, good evening to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Second, I'm grateful or thankful to organizers to give me a chance to express my opinion. Final point, I try to be precise, to the point, very, very provocative, and very disrespectful. So my presentation based on territorial military and energy security, in particular when it comes to energy security, pipeline security protection between three countries, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey. So when it comes to military security, I have to be very disrespectful because three respectful Minister of Defense comes together annually. They have a nice chat. They have a nice exchange of opinion, like we have tonight. Then, contrary to us, they sign a protocol. It can be confidential, that we don't really know. And then they go home. That's a very nice example of being, Eugene, disrespectful. Second point, surprisingly enough, last year, it was the first occasion that three Ministers of Defense come together and decided to set up Armed Forces Cooperation Group. So the first meeting, so they first of all, they met in Ankara. They created Armed Forces Cooperation Group. And then the second meeting was here in Tbilisi in October last year. I hope very much for the sake of the cooperative group that it wasn't the last meeting. I hope and look very much forward to see further meetings. But I'm very doubtful about that because the issue of failed military coup in Turkey, as you're all aware of, have a very troubling effects on all meetings between various defense ministry officials. And it can be said right now that basically meetings being either halted or just postponed for some time in the future. So when it's come to territorial cooperation in pipeline security, then I have to say there is a very good bilateral cooperation between Azerbaijan and Georgia. Yes, indeed. All the necessary links are there, all the necessary cooperative projects between two countries are very much in place. The only point that I have to warn my Georgian and Azerbaijani colleagues, do not fall into complacency factor. That's a very important point because so far there was no explosion, neither in Azerbaijan nor in Georgia. I can say very good, excellent, but complacency factor is always there. So beware, the terrorists are just looking for the moment to blow you up very easily. So Turkish story, unfortunately, very much decoupled from the Azerbaijani-Georgian story, because all the explosion on pipelines, whether it's BTC that you're well aware of, or whether it's Baku, Tbilisi, Erzurum, took place in Turkey, surprisingly enough. And over 6 years period, there have been 210 explosions in Turkey. Some have been investigated, some have been not investigated properly. The point is that in Turkey, compared to Azerbaijan and Georgia, pipeline policy protection remains in the hands of gendarme or gendarmerie and coastal guard, and also borders as a nation-state security company for pipeline and oil security protection in Turkey. For special guards of borders. Borders become so disgruntled with their own security operators and also with operators of gendarme and coastal guard that they ask for integrated security protection system that should be given to private companies. This initiative began 2 years ago. I have no clue how far it has gone, but only thing that I do know that, again, after 15th of July, everything put on hold. So Turkey remains very, very vulnerable. And the final point of my presentation, on the 23rd of July, so 8 days after the failed military coup, Gendarme and Coastal Guard have been taken out from the land forces and naval forces of Turkish armed forces and brought under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Interior. How this new arrangement will affect a pipeline security protection remains a big question mark. End of the story. Thank you. Good.
Thank you, Eugene. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Eugene.
Well, I'm glad about it. Thank you.
And yeah, thank you for highlighting this issue of trilateral cooperation, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey. And this is one area that NATO hasn't been directly involved, but Turkey has sponsored NATO-based doctrinal exercises with the three countries in scenarios in which pipeline security infrastructure security is part of the scenario where the multinational brigade works together. So finally, I would like to pass the floor to Tinatin Karasanidze. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me on this interesting conference. I'm the last one, so I know that you are all hungry and you wanted to go for dinner, but I'll try to be brief about my presentation. So my presentation is connected to the Islamic State and to the strategy and the changing of the strategy of terrorist organizations from Al-Qaeda to Islamic States. The conflict that is now going nowadays in the Middle East, this is the war in Syria and the rise of Islamic State, so-called Islamic State, and other changes in the Middle East. It puts under the risk the whole regional and global energy security and energy policy. And as researchers, they mentioned from 3 to 5 years it will make the very big risk for the whole energy security in the global level in the world. So the terrorist strategy was changing time by time, and terrorist organizations, they do follow the development in techniques or facilities in the world. For example, when the internet and some electricity was invented, they began to attack on this cybersecurity attacks they organized. So in the 1990s, the most popular targeted were tourists, foreign tourists in different countries. Let me remind you one of the good example of this strategy of the terrorist organizations. In Egypt in 1997, in the 17th of November, there was a terrorist attack in the Luxor in Hatshepsut Palace when the members of Al-Gamal Islamiyya, the Islamist organization, who called for releasing from the US prison the Omar Abdurrahman. It was their member who was captured and was imprisoned in the US. So they attacked on the Hatshepsut Palace and they killed about 62 people. And from these 62 people, about 58 people were foreign tourists. What does it mean? The members of the organization, they knew that the tourism took the third place in the economy of Egyptian economy. So when they decided to push on the Egyptian government and to destroy economy, which will make some kind of impact of the political stability of the Egypt, and then the people or the society, Egyptian society, they will decide to change their government. It was the un-Islamic government for these members of the organization. So, and before these events, the Egyptian government, they were thinking to have the revenue about $4 billion US, and this income gonna be on the by inviting the more tourists in Egypt. So they were expecting to have about 4 million tourists this year, and these attacks, of course, ruined all their plans. And I was a year later in Egypt in the same place, and I saw this Hatshepsut Palace. It's this very vast field, and there is no place to hide away from terrorist attacks. And I realized what kind of threats it will be for the foreign tourists to come again to Egypt and to visit this country. And as Egyptians, they told me it destroyed during the 5-6 years the whole economy of Egyptian economy, which was based on the tourism during the 1990s. But when the in 1973, you know, there was a battle between the war between the Arab states and Israel. So, and then there was a rapid increase of prices on oil, and so oil became the very interesting and very important part of the security and the policy. And so, terrorist organizations, they decided to change their policy and to target like oil fields or oil pipelines or electricity pipelines. And so they decided to attack and target the symbols of the strengths of the above-mentioned countries, for example, in the Middle East. And you know, the Middle East is the region of the where we do have the most countries, they have produced oil and gas, and this is the region where we do have the organizations of terrorist organizations that have the activity in these regions. And in 1998, when Osama bin Laden, he issued the fatwa, and fatwa was about the declaration, and he called all Muslims that it's going to be the obligation of all Muslims to kill all Americans, because Americans, they were the enemy of the Muslim population. His fatwa was based on the interpretation of the Sharia. He said that anything existed in the Middle East, in the Muslim countries, this is the property of the Muslim population that should be used by the Ummah. This is the Muslim society or Muslim community, let's say like this. And so, but Americans, they do use Saudi oil, and they do make money on the Saudi oil, and there was no benefit for Saudi people. And it was like the agreement between Saudi royal family and American government to use this oil and to have the benefit from this oil. So that's why they became the targets for Osama bin Laden's fatwa to kill all Americans in the whole world. And let me remind you the sayings of Said Qutb. He is Egyptian theologian who said that every inch where the Muslim pray, and he said there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of the God. This is the Islamic land. So that means that this whole world is the Islamic land, and and what is existing, any natural resources, minerals and gas, oil or other pipelines, this is a property of a Muslim society, of the Islamic society, Islamic Ummah, and it should be used just for by Muslims and not infidels, so kafirs that are called for the terrorists. And so if we just go to the moderate Islamic groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, I'd like to mention that they had in their program when they came to power after the Arab Spring in Egypt, they have in their economic program that it will be reasonable to cut the gas supply for Israel, and it will be somehow solving the question of Palestinians during the negotiations with Israel, but in reality they didn't do it. They just give it to the future times. And what about the Al-Qaeda and other radical organizations? They do attack and target oil pipelines and gas pipelines. And they decided to destroy these pipelines because they are the property of the infidels, of the kafirs. What about the US, Islamic State? Islamic State, it's called like the group, but for some researchers it's called like the process, because Islamic group, it's not the group, it's like the quasi-state as they declared themselves, but this is a unique process in the terrorism history, because this is the first group in the history of terrorism that declared themselves as the state. And this was done by the ruler Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who, by the way, if you have follow the news, for 2 days there is widespread information about him that he's killed or he is dead. There is no confirmation about his death, but there is the news spread by the Jerusalem Post or Syrian official resources that the members and the leaders of the Iraqi al-Raqqa fraction, they are called together to select the successor of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. That means that he's disappeared. In fact, he last time appeared in September this year, and he called the members of Islamic State not to leave Mosul and to have to attack Turkish cities and to destroy some facilities or some infrastructure in Turkish cities. And then it was just the radio recorded. There was no face of him, and he never appeared after the September event, and that make me and some other scholars think that he is really dead, but on the website there is no confirmation about it. About Tarha Batirashvili or other leaders, always the website of this Islamic State, they put on the website that they're killed. Batirashvili was killed, by the way, 8 times, for example, and the 9th time he was officially declared as the killed and dead person, and then he was replaced by another leader. And the gathering, the secret gathering now for the leaders of the Mosul fraction, they make me think that there is something wrong with the Islamic State, and they do need the new successor, new leader of this organization or the state, so it's called. And it means that there will be the new policy might be for Islamic State, because Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's policy was like, and the organization's whole policy was to create Islamic Caliphate, and going to be in the borders of the Umayyad Caliphate. And in these borders, Georgia, part of Azerbaijan, and the whole Georgia going to be like part of the Caucasus Emirate. And even in 2015, they added, like they created Khorasan Vilayet, including all Central Asian countries and some part of Afghanistan and Pakistan too. And the local Islamic organizations like Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, they pledged oath to this organization. That means that there are going to be some kind of threats to the Central Asian states too, to their energy security, to their political stability, and so and so. Because Islamic State, it arose as the competition to the Al-Qaeda and to the Taliban regime in the Central Asian region. What about Georgia and about the streets that's gonna might be from Islamic State? I can give you just brief information. My previous speaker mentioned Batirashvili and other members from Georgia, and when Islamic State did arise and it was in the media, Georgia became very popular. And then the special gorge, it was the Pankisi Gorge that became very popular, unfortunately for us, because we do have about from 50 to 100 members went to Syria to fight in Syria and Iraq. It was, they didn't fight just in Islamic states, but they fought in Jabhat al-Nusra and other Islamic organizations too. But why Georgia was so popular? Because the members of Islamic State, like Batirashvili, they became the leaders and they became the heroes for local inhabitants, not for all of them, but for young generation living in Pankisi Gorge, because he was a poor guy living in the small village. He was serving in Georgian military, then he was pushed from the Georgian military services, and then he had no choice just to go to Syria to fight, and he became such kind of leader, and he was really popular during this period before he was killed. Nowadays, this number of members are going to Syria and Iraq is decreasing from Georgia and even from Azerbaijan, because might be there is not such a lot of money in Islamic State to fund their members to give them salaries, for example, and it's there and so popular. It was before about 1 or 2 years ago. Thank you. I will stop here.
Well, it's, thank you. This is very interesting how this has worked out, because the speakers have basically covered the gamut of what the allies are dealing with now and interested in, from north with the Russian threat to the south with the instability coming from the Middle East and the terrorist threat coming with them and the refugees. So thank you very much to the speakers. It's very interesting. I wished we had more time. At this point, we're going to open the floor to questions. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much to all speakers for interesting presentations. I have two questions. One from Mr. Cafteradze, and the second for my friend Walter Strodel. For you, Mr. Cafteradze, I would like, you explained a lot to us about what Georgia has done on cybersecurity, and it's impressive, as Bill Lahey also remarked. But I was wondering whether there is some cooperation with your neighbors also, because you didn't cover this in your presentation. For example, Georgia is in a very good position to cooperate with Armenia and with Azerbaijan. With Armenia and with Azerbaijan on a bilateral basis in order to prevent cyber attacks or to react against cyber attacks. And I want to ask you whether there are some preoccupations in your office to establish collaboration with your neighbors on this, and what exactly could you do together with them? And for Walter, he raised this issue of radicalization of people from here, from the South Caucasus, and I was wondering what these countries in the South Caucasus could do in order to prevent such radicalization. Whether there is a matter of acting together or it's developing legislation or policy, what they should be doing in order to be more effective in fighting against radicalization of terrorists?
I have to intervene here. I want to apologize for technical disorganization. Mr. David Cafteradze is actually representing his agency. It's not Irakli Gwenetadze, so I'm sorry.
I just read what was written on this.
So that's our fault.
Okay, about question, as I mentioned on my slide, these two information sharing platforms. We already implement these platforms and helped to the Azerbaijan governmental cert to implement these same products in their network. And also on next year, we have planned to conduct a cyber exercise. It is, how to say, it is cyber game between red and blue teams. Example, we are red team, attacker team, and there are blue teams which have their own, how to say, virtual machines, and we are attacking them about all day. And they have 1 day to, how to say, handle this incident. We want to plan this exercise on next year, because we with Azerbaijan, yeah. And we have same exercises we have conduct this year, but for our critical infrastructure. We also have conducted Cyber Olympiad for students. This is the same with a game between red and blue teams. And we also want to, and Azerbaijan CERT team also, how to say, is very interested to take this project to the Azerbaijan, and we are helping in this case to conduct this Cyber Olympiad in next year in Baku also. We have very good cooperation. We also helped them to become a first member. First is, as I mentioned on my presentation, is CSERT community, worldwide CSERT community. And to become there, you need to, how to say, going some steps, audits and so on. And we are one sponsor of their team. We have very good relationship with these teams. But but Armenian governmental cert not exists at this moment. They have only educational cert under of university.
So to point at your question, we looked into the topic more detailed in the Balkans from an Austrian perspective, but I think it applies for here as well. What we tried to trigger was what are the methodology of radicalization groups, so the recruit of this kind of baseline youth. So what do they do to attract the attention of people who have no political and religious opinion? And basically they focus on 3 groups, so the smart people, the sportive people, and the average people. And for all of these groups they have some attraction. So the smart ones, they get scholarships. For the sportive ones, they get some sponsorship for local sport clubs. And for the average, they just do some fun, like a Supra or whatever, and make it free of charge. And this is the entry fee, and then the radicalization starts with teaching, with getting them off the parents, and granting some funds. You can do it the same way, just the other direction. I think that would work. You offer scholarships for people to come to Tbilisi to study for free. For the people who are smart. For the people who are less smart but strong, you offer scholarships for clubs, and you give them opportunity to become Georgian sportsmen or women. And for the average, you just keep them like PP is doing it, and just fund some local activities and parties and sponsor some money and make them part of the society.
Thank you. Radu.
Yeah, thank you indeed for a very interesting presentation. So I'll try to be short. Starting from the last speaker, so you mentioned around 100 Georgian possible, yeah, or proved people who joined ISIS. How credible is this figure? I've seen some other figures also in media. I'm not sure which of them. This is just shortly. And maybe for other speakers, if they can join them, answering, what is your assessment for the region as such, since we are talking about regional security threats? And do we have a similar picture in Azerbaijan, Armenia, I don't know, Ukraine, Russia? I mean, a bigger number of fighters or people what might be in the future willing. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. These are the official numbers. According to unofficial, there are more, about 200, but not more. This is what was issued by the Ministry of Interior Affairs, so this is based on it. Let me just answer to the previous question about what's going to be to prevent the radicalization of these people. On the Georgian case, for example, now the Ministry of Education of Georgia, they give about 14 places, like the quotas for the people living in the mountains to enter Georgian universities without exams. So it's like the scholarship for them. What the problem radicalization in Pankisi Gorge, in the mountains of, we have the different kind of radicalization in Acharya mountains and in Pankisi Gorge, and we have the ethnic Azeris who just joined this in Syria and in Iraq in different, not just IS, but also Jabhat al-Nusra and other organizations, Al-Qaeda, of course, and fighting in different countries. This is the lack of secular education, the lack of religion education. Most youth generation, they are going to Saudi Arabia. Before they were going to Egypt, and they were studied in madrasas. In Hanbali Mazhab, Hanbali, this is the most radical Mazhab in the Sunni Islam, in Wahhabi madrasas. And when they're coming back now to Georgia, and they have money, by the way, and they're building, for example, mosques in Pankisi Gorge, and they have more followers, and they're more competitive than the local imams who don't know Arabic language, they don't know Quran by heart, by the way. And when they have debate discussion between the old and young generation they all wins because they have the citation from Quran by heart, and they can say to this youth living in the villages what they wanted to say. And as there is no education in religious affairs, so you can just trust these young people what you wanted to try them to believe in. This is a problem. I had talked with the different imams from Wahhabi Mazhabs, and they have the interesting definition of the Quran that there is written to kill infidels, and there is like the jihad, this is there to kill for your purposes or any kind of the people. So this is a problem in Georgia. So now we have these several projects done by the administrative president of Georgia. They opened some clubs in Pankisi Gorge, and they decided to help to fund some local businesses in Pankisi Gorge to help these people to be more integrated into the Georgian society. Thank you.
I think one very important point is not to bring someone from Pankisi Gorge to Tbilisi, but to take a Tbilisi education down to the local level. I think it will be more a reversal and a more positive effect on the local communities. Because if you bring them from there down here, you again cut them from the next generation, and you need the next generation locally based, that they will continue to educate the next generation. So if the Georgian universities in Tbilisi will go to the regional communities and will teach them in place there, I think it will be kind of extra effect on the local communities, extra effect on the next generation of younger students, and it will go from mouth to mouth. That will be more positive, I think. Thank you.
We can take one more question. Yes, Professor? Yes.
Thank you very much. I have a question to all panelists. We mentioned here about some radical Islamic movements, etc., about different terrorist groups. But what should we do with state terrorism? And first of all, the most important danger which is coming from the Russian Federation. We know, for example, my Georgian compatriots, they know how, for example, Russia was supporting and funded during the military operations in Abkhazia, the so-called confederations of the mountains peoples of Caucasus, for example. We know, for example, the Soviet experience, how they funded such organizations in Europe as Red Brigades and Red Fraction in Federal Republic of Germany and Italy, and also PKK on the territory of Turkey. And we know that today, for example, Russia is continuing to stage terrorism movement in the eastern part of Ukraine by supplying some diversionist and terrorist groups the different type of military weapons. And for example, on the territory of Chechnya during the both military operations, the number of victims prevailed 200,000 people. So by this way, I think that it's more danger terrorist by this way movement than the actions of different terrorist groups, because according to the number of victims, and we know that about the resolution of the General Assembly of UN 1984, according to the condemning each type or each kind of the state terrorist. But unfortunately, by this way, it's the biggest, by this way, danger. And we know that, first of all, together with the people, the target, there are some energy infrastructures, infrastructure objects. In 2006, in February 2006, we know about the explosion of the gas pipeline, which was implemented by the intelligence service of Russian Federation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I can take that one. I worked in multiple regions, and I can reassure that each terrorist group that exists on this planet has some ties to some state. It just depends in which point of view you want to see it. I mean, the whole genesis of Taliban and Afghanistan and Soviet Union and US supply, I mean, you just can reverse the whole story for any state. The problem is that there's always different interests, there's always converging horizons about the future and how it should look like. And there's a competition of the strongest, and there's no court internationally who can do that. So basically everything is allowed, but it's not forbidden by somebody, and if it's forbidden by somebody, he has to enforce it, and if he cannot enforce it, it's not forbidden.
It's, with regard to Afghanistan and US supported the Mujahideen's movement according to the Reagan doctrine. Really, Reagan administration released about $2 billion, but Mujahideen, it was guerrilla movement against the Soviet occupants of the territory of Afghanistan. It was not terrorist activity. Guerrillas, they were fighting against the Soviet militaries, but state terrorism is when, for example, concrete state is fighting against peaceful populations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chutadze, for your question. It's a very right question, because state terrorism of Russian Federation is very actual for us. If you take consideration book of former White Guard officer, Colonel Evgeny Mesner, which was issued in Argentina 1960, very concrete estimation is there. I don't remember this quotation, but main sense is saboteurs, terrorists will be new weapon for war for future. So Russian authors of hybrid war took into consideration this approach. So, yes, you're absolutely right. During 2014, 2015, many explosions took place in Kharkiv, Odessa, first of all, for more destabilization of internal situation in this city, to provoke so-called protest of Russian-speaking citizens of Ukraine. It was absolutely clear that Russian special groups were penetrated into these cities. Kharkiv is located not so far from Russian border. And now we have some decrease of this activity. But I don't exclude that new attacks which will masked under struggle of Russian-speaking citizens against Kiev junta. And other point, thank you for your personally for your signature to protect my former colleagues from Crimean think tank Nomos. I was positioned as director for energy programs of this center during 7 years. And 2 of my colleagues were arrested approximately 1 month ago by Russian FSB in Sevastopol. Of course, they are spies, saboteurs, etc., etc. And now it's new approach of Russia against Ukrainian citizens, Crimean Tatars too, because Crimean Tatars traditionally were under pressure of Russian attention from FSB and before military campaign, military occupation by Russia, Crimea Peninsula. And many, many times when I had my position Council of National Security and Defense, Russia provides us special secret information concerning some Islamic tendencies inside Crimean Tatars. It's absolutely absurd, because Crimean Tatars, they are part of Sufi direction, so-called soft Islamic version. But now we see serious matters which are directed against some Crimean Tatars activists who are on the Crimean Peninsula. And I think that we need consolidation of efforts to prevent escalation of this state terrorism. From my point of view, it's my last point, we need new additional sanctions against Russia, which must include most sensitive position for Russia, trade of energy resources. Because my job, former Euro Commissioner Günther Oettinger, who was responsible for energy relationship, for energy responsibility, he has unique opportunity to receive Hero of Russia. Why? Because he proposed in 2014 exemption from sanction regime for trade of hydrocarbon resources. 70% of Russian incomes are from hydrocarbon trading. So I think that Senator Kardin, which initiated additional ideas how to eliminate Russian activity in Europe, consider this option. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I want to give a round of applause for our panelists. This is really a very interesting briefing. Thank you very much.